In our last few class, we already did number of one-dimensional array example. Now today we will learn two-dimensional array, 2D array. And matrix is the best example to understand a two-dimensional array. Now if you see the next slide, here you can see this is basically a matrix, right? There are basically some row and some column. Okay, and it is says 3 into 3, basically 3 row and 3 column matrix, so that's why it's a 3 into 3 matrix, right? Now you can see here the row 1 2 3. I basically make it 0 1 2 because to give you an understanding of the index. So it's a row 0, then row 1 and row 2, and similarly these are basically column 0, column 1 and column 2. Now if you check the value 1, this is basically row 0, column 0, so this is basically positions in a 0 0, right? So this is basically row 0 and column 0. Similar way, if we check the value 4, so this is basically row 0 and column 1. So that's mean 0 1 it is its positions. So if I take the value 7, that is basically 0 row 0 and column 2, so that's mean 0 2 should be its positions. Similar way, if we take row 1, so 1 and then 0, so this 3 is basically 1 0, then this 5 is basically 1 and 1. Similarly 8 is basically 1 and 2, so these are basically its index. Similarly for 2 index, we can see the positions something like this: 2 0, then 2 1, then 2 2. So in Eclipse, what we will do, we will basically try to collect these matrix value and try to print this matrix. Okay, so let's check it in Eclipse. So I have already created a matrix example class under com.demo.array, and let me double click it here so that I can get a wider view. Now we already know what is one dimensional array and what is its index. So if I create a matrix variable, let's say mat, and if we try to make it is a one dimensional type of thing, so the syntax is something like this. Okay, so int mat is basically the array name. Then for single dimensional array, we will use third bracket start end, we use the new keyword, and as it's a integer type, then int, and here we can give the size, that is let's say 3. Okay, this is one dimensional array because we are using a single index. Now to make it a two-dimensional array, so we can use the syntax like this. Instead of third bracket open and close one time, it should be two time, and similarly here also we have to give the same syntax, and we can put the size here. Okay, so like this way, so you can see that I am giving two index here, and that's why it is basically represent a two-dimensional array. Okay, and you can see this 3 and 3 is something like row and column, so this is basically represent row and this represent column. So if you again check our ppt, so you can see here that this is basically represent row and column combinations for this matrix, right? So similar way we are actually trying to do the same thing. Now you can make this 3 into 3 more dynamic by putting some dynamic value. And how we can do that? So instead of putting 3 and 3, we can use some variable, let's say r for row and c for column. Okay, and using the help of scanner class, we can collect the value from user, and that value we can put or we can set it here. Let's say this is r and this is c. Now to collect the value of how many row and how many column, definitely we have to give some print statement so that user can understand, and finally we have to collect the value under r and c. So I am not going to tell you exact syntax, I just try to copy paste the syntax here so that it will take less time. So you can see here this is the exact syntax: scanner class instance, then taking how many row and how many column, and that will be collected under r and c, and we are trying to declare a two-dimensional array name is mat, and the limit is basically r and c, that is basically row and column. Now what is our aim? Our aim is to collect the value something like this way. Okay, and then print them. Okay, so to collect this value, you can see here first we have to collect row 0, then we will collect column 0, column 1 and column 2. So then the next step we will try to collect the row 1, that is basically column 0, column 1 and column 2. So similar way you can get the row 2. Okay, so that's mean we need actually two iterations, one for row and one for column. So first step is collecting matrix value. Okay, and second step is printing that matrix, print of that matrix. So for that we will try to create a for loop. Let's say int I start from 0, I less than r is basically row. Then our iteration start here, and under that for each row we have to collect multiple column. Okay, so here again we have to create a for loop, that is basically nested for loop, and the syntax should be look like this. So you can see j is equal to 0, j start from 0, then j less than c basically my column. So for let's say first iteration 0, whatever the column, that type of iterations happen in the next step, and we will here try to collect the value. And what is this value? In these iterations we are actually trying to collect each row's column value, right? So we can give a statement like this, enter column. Okay, now we can also make it more dynamic, means column number 1 2 3, though in this syntax or in this ppt I give like column 0, column 1, column 2, but actually I give you an understanding these are basically index 0 1 2 3, but ultimately this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3. Similarly this is basically row 1, row 2, row 3, right? So instead of making a column 0, we can start from column 1. And how we can do that? So j start from 0, instead of j we can make it like j plus 1, right? So if we make it j plus 1, so in the first iteration it will say column 1, in second iteration it will say column 2, right? So once user enter any value for each column, that should be collected under mat array variable, right? This one. Okay, and here we will maintain the row column syntax. Row basically I and column basically j, right? So using this mat ij we will try to collect the value that will be entered by user by reading this statement. Okay, and how we can collect that one? You can see this is a integer type, and with the help of scanner class we can use this one. So we can use sc, and as it's a integer type array variable, so we can use next int. Now you can see here that for first iterations of I, whatever the column, that type of iterations or that numbers of iterations will be going on, and every time it will give enter column, enter column, enter column. So for which row it is basically entering, we can make another statement here, same like our column statement. Show enter row, and row basically represent with this I, so we can make I plus 1, because for first iteration it is 0 index, so we can make it as a row 1, then row 2, row 3. Okay, and for each row there will be multiple inner iterations for each column, and finally whatever the value collected, that will be collected here. So this way in this matrix we are actually collecting all these value 1 4 7 3 5 8 2 6 9 with nested iterations, right? Now the first step is basically collecting the matrix value, but what is our aim? Our aim is the second step, to printing that matrix. Okay, so for that definitely we have to use that nested loop concept again. So let me copy paste the same thing, that is basically the looped conditions. Then we will try to give the proper printing statement so that it will give me the exact this type of matrix. Okay, so you can see here I again use the for loop, that is basically index 0 for this I variable, and less than r represent the row, and again under that using this j I am actually trying to use the condition j less than c represent column, and here I have to print the matrix in a proper way. So for first row I have to print the column in a single line, right? And each column value should be separated with some space. So how we can do that? We can create a system.out.println print statement, not println. Print statement show that each column value should be printed in a single line. Then I am trying to print that value, that is basically for, let's say, 0 index. So I is 0. Now column, let's say there are 3 columns, so j will be iterated 3 times for I 0. So mat 0, then j 0. So mat 0 0, then mat 0 1, then mat 0 2. Then I am giving here a 2 space. Okay, that's mean after printing each column there will be a space separations for the next column value. So once I did this one, so for first iterations of the row, then it come for the second iterations, which is basically for the column, and that column will be printed in a single line. Then once the first iterations basically for this row count is done, so it will go for the second row. Okay, and for the second row that should be print in a next line. So that's why here we have to give a system.out.println statement, so that it will go in a next line to print the next row columns. Okay, so each iterations when the column operations is done, it will go for the second line or the next line, and for the second iterations of the row it will again print the related columns. Okay, do one more best practice. What is that? We have to close the scanner class instance. Okay, once it is done, so you can see in our first for loop iterations we are actually trying to collect using sc.nextInt. Now here our operations is done after this for loop, right? Operations means scanner class operations is done. So here we can simply close our scanner class instance. Now save this file. Now our program is ready. So what I actually did, I did a dynamic type of declarations of this two-dimensional array, that is basically using the row and column combinations. And in our first nested loop operations we are trying to collect the value of each row column combinations. Then in our second nested iterations we are trying to printing that matrix in a proper manner. So if you run it and try to give how many row, let's say the same thing we will try to implement 3 row and 3 column. Okay, so let me put row number is 3 and how many column, that is also 3. So 3 into 3. Now it will say for row 1 enter column 1. So what is the column 1? So column 1 is basically 1, then 4, column 2 and column 3 is basically 7. Okay, so I am not taking the index, I am just simply saying that column 1 2 3 row 1 2 3. Okay, so first 1 4 7 for first row. Okay, so 1 then 4 then 7. Then it will say for row 2 means our second row, it says enter column 1. So what is the column 1? So basically 3 then 5 then 8. So put it 3 then 5 then 8. Now if I enter, it will ask me for the next row what is the column. So column 1 is 2 then 6 then 9. Okay, so we can make 2 6 then 9. Now if I enter, so you can see I am getting the matrix 147. Okay, so this is basically 147, then 358. So you can see 358, then 269, that is basically 269. Okay, so how I do that, you can understand that first we will try to take the value, then we will try to print, and this is a two-dimensional array, example. So we have to create a two-dimensional array, and here you can create some static with some static value, but for our case I am trying to make it a row column combinations with some dynamic value, and based on that we are trying to collect the value with some nested loop and then try to print the same value in a matrix format with some nested loop combinations. So this way you can create or declare an two-dimensional array, set it value, set its size, and finally you can print that two-dimensional array. Hope you can understand the array concept of two-dimensional, and in our next class we will try to create or implement some other example with this two-dimensional array.
I believe this video has helped you to understand about the topic. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe, click on the bell notifications and select all so that you don't miss any video from this channel.